What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my updated Week 11 top 36 running back rankings. Already posted the wide receivers earlier today. Check those out if you guys are interested. Any questions, drop them down below. But let's just dive right into Tier 1 here. And as per usual at the running back position, Tier 1 is very, very stacked. I could see an argument for a lot of these guys being higher, lower. Once you're getting towards the bottom of this tier, it feels like all of them are kind of getting underranked at this point. But this is the current order that I have. I have Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, CMC, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kareem Hunt, and Kyren Williams. For Bijan, he has been on an absolute tear over his last 5 games. Achane had his first down game of the season with Tua in the lineup, but he draws a really nice matchup this week. The Raiders have allowed the 6th most points per game to the running back position. You have Derrick Henry, who's not in a great matchup, but is the running back 1 in points per game. He's been dominant. He's going to be a high-end running back 1 regardless of matchup. Then you have CMC, who came back to a very strong 20 opportunities. The receiving work was totally there, and I think he'll just get more and more comfortable, and the efficiency, should follow. Then you have Joe Mixon, who has been an absolute workhorse. A really nice matchup here against the Cowboys, top 5 in points per game allowed. He is a very strong play. Then we've got Alvin Kamara, who's likely going to continue to be force-fed opportunities, both on the ground and through the air. Their running back position is banged up. The wide receivers are banged up. Their top 2 are, pretty much done at this point. Maybe Olave comes back, but you know the point. So Kamara is going to have a lot of opportunities here. The receiving usage is going to be top tier. I think he's a firm running back 1. Then I have Jahmyr Gibbs. I know some people thought this was too low. It's honestly just such a stacked position at this point, and pretty much all the guys ranked ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs just have much more established workloads. Gibbs is going to be in a split, but this is a fantastic matchup. The Jaguars are top 5 in points per game allowed. The Lions have the highest implied point total this week, so he should get some volume. The efficiency is always going to be there, and the touchdown upside is going to be there also. Then I have Kareem Hunt, and this might be the last week that Kareem Hunt is a bona fide locked-in start in your lineup. Isaiah Pacheco back at practice. This is obviously assuming that Pacheco does not play this week, which it does not seem like he's trending, towards giving it a go. So probably back next week at the earliest. But for Kareem Hunt, that means he's going to continue operating as the workhorse. The Bills are top 2 in points per game allowed to the running back position, and we have seen Kareem Hunt produce in multiple types of game scripts. If they go ahead early, he's going to command a ton of work on the ground. If they're trailing, like we saw last week, he can get very involved as a pass catcher. So it's good to see that, regardless of game script, he is going to be a strong play. And then the last guy in this tier, someone I actually bumped up from earlier in the week, it's Kyren Williams. I think I was maybe a little bit too low on him. It's a nice matchup, 7th in points per game allowed for the Patriots, and he's still going to handle a very solid workload. Then moving into tier 2, I actually bumped Kenneth Walker down into this area, just moved him down a few spots. It really just came down to the matchup. The Seahawks are bottom 8 in terms of implied point total this week. So it's not the best matchup, but Kenneth Walker has still been very productive. He's the running back 6 in points per game. He has shown that he's fairly game script proof with the added receiving work. So I still think he's a very, very strong play, but I did just move him down a few spots. Then I have Jonathan Taylor going up against the Colts. I do think for his rushing production, his efficiency, the move back to Richardson should help him out. But I think you also have then the downside of him potentially getting touchdowns vultured near the goal line. But he's the running back 12 in points per game, around where I have him ranked this week. Then we're going to go with Breece Hall. He is someone that I moved up at least a few spots from my earlier in the week rankings. And pretty much what I talked about and what is still true is that he has just not had much success in the touchdown department. He has 1 touchdown in the last 7 games. And so that's why I kind of had, put him lower, right? He wasn't getting in the end zone. That was holding him back. But then I really thought about it, and I was like, is there some fundamental issue here with Breece Hall not getting into the end zone? Or is this just a sequence of kind of unlucky games? Now, obviously, this Jets offense hasn't been great, and if they were putting up more points, he would have more touchdown upside. But the usage has been strong. He's involved as a pass catcher. The rushing efficiency is much improved from early on in the season. And this week against the Colts, they have the 10th highest implied point total. So if Vegas is projecting them to be a top 10 offense this week, and Breece Hall has that type of usage, then I do think I'm not going to ding him too harshly for the poor touchdown luck, because it probably is, just more him being unlucky than some fundamental flaw with him as a player. Then after Breece, going to go with David Montgomery. Like I talked about with Gibbs, this is a great matchup. 5th in points per game allowed to the running back position. The Lions are 13.5 point favorites. This is going to just be a smash spot for both Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Then I have Chase Brown. I think I might have moved him up a couple of spots from the last video. It's a bad matchup here against the Chargers. They've allowed the second fewest points per game to the running back position, but Chase Brown looks like a bona fide workhorse at this point. In week 10, he had 13 attempts, 11 targets. With no Zach Moss, he is going to be game script proof. He's dominating the opportunities. And even in a bad matchup, this is a good offense he's a part of. With that type of usage, I think he'll be just fine. Then the last guy in this tier is going to be Josh Jacobs going up against the Bears. Jacobs has really turned it around over the last few weeks. 17.4 points per game in his last four. I think this is a fair spot for him to settle in as like a higher end running back 2 play. Then tier 3 is going to be very small, just kind of two guys right in between tier 2 and tier 4. We have Aaron Jones and James Cook. For Aaron Jones, kind of like Breece, he struggled a little bit in the touchdown department, but still getting solid usage on a pretty solid offense. And then for James Cook, this is really matchup based. It's just that the Chiefs have allowed the fewest points per game to the running back position, and James Cook also isn't a full-on workhorse, so Chase Brown draws that tough matchup, but he's pretty much dominating the opportunities. James Cook still has Ray Davis, Ty Johnson kind of working their way in, which is why I'm a little bit lower on him compared to a guy like Chase Brown. Now moving into tier 4, going to start off this tier with DeAndre Swift going up against the Packers. This was actually in week 10. It was Swift's worst game since week 3. The Bears offense also has the third fewest implied points, so Vegas is not expecting them to look good. They've been out of sync over the last few weeks. They did fire Shane Waldron, so maybe some things turn around here, but even when they were struggling, DeAndre Swift was still a fine fantasy option. I think he's a nice mid-tier RB2. Then after Swift, going to go with J.K. Dobbins going up against the Bengals. I will say week 10 wasn't great for Dobbins, and it was the fact that Gus Edwards came back from injury and like automatically stepped into pretty solid usage with 10 carries to 15 for J.K. Dobbins. Also not the best matchup here against the Bengals, who are allowing the 9th fewest points per game to the running back spot. So still playable as a running back too, but it would have been, better for Dobbins if Edwards stepped back in and was just getting like the Vidal usage, which was just a few opportunities per game. That was not the case. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. He's really just been getting fed these last few weeks. 23, 15, 21 opportunities in his last 3. I think this is a fine spot here against the Rams. Then looking at tier 5, kind of an interesting tier here. We're going to start it off with Nick Chubb going up against the Saints. Now, I do think this could be the week that Nick Chubb kind of has that breakout game, really launches himself into like that RB2 territory rest of season. The Saints have allowed the 3rd most points per game to the running back position. The Browns have a, respectable implied point total this week, kind of middle of the pack. I think this could be the game where Nick Chubb actually produces. Then we have Tony Pollard going up against the Vikings. This is a tough matchup here. The Vikings have allowed the 4th fewest points per game to the running back position. You also have Tajay Spears, who returned to the lineup and had pretty solid usage last week. So if this is a trailing game script, do they then go to more towards Tajay Spears like we kind of saw last week? So I don't think Pollard's like penciled in as that workhorse we saw earlier on with Spears out, but still relevant as like a back-end RB2. Then I have Najee Harris going up against the Ravens. Came into this week dealing with an ankle injury, but he's been a full participant in practice. He should be fine. It still is a bad matchup, though. The Ravens have the 7th fewest points per game allowed to the running back position. Also, game script-wise, the Steelers are going to be dogs, so maybe this is a spot where, Jaylen Warren gets more run. I will say, though, like, the Ravens, in terms of yardage, have been very locked down to running backs. I do think where they're susceptible, though, is just the fact that this pass defense is so bad that the Steelers should be able to put up points, which could leave, Najee Harris opportunities for those goal line opportunities, touches in the red zone if they're just able to move the ball pretty consistently. And then the last guy here in tier 5 is Rico Dowdle. And for Rico here, he was someone that I really liked as like a later round running back target. I thought he should have been the favorite to kind of pull away in this Cowboys backfield. And I think looking back on it, the logic was correct, right? He has kind of pulled away on this Cowboys offense. The problem is it doesn't really seem like, we're reaping the benefits of it too much just because of this Dak injury and because this Cowboys offense, is in shambles at this point. Like McCarthy came out, said they need to get him the ball. He was their lead back. If this was like the same sentiment we had earlier on in the season when Dak was healthy, I'd feel way more excited about him. But at this point, they're tied for the 2nd lowest implied point total. It's not a great matchup here. The Texans have allowed the 5th fewest points per game, so they can feed them, but it's just not a very running back friendly environment, both in terms of the matchup and the actual team he's on. So that was tier 5. Now moving into tier 6, going to start off this tier with Jaylen Warren. Like I talked about with Najee, this could be more of like the Jaylen Warren game script. He's been fairly involved in the last few weeks. 15, 12, 16 opportunities in those games. And then we have Audric Estime, who really just kind of like burst out onto the scene last week, took 14 of the 17 carries. Seems like they want to give him more run here. So like volume on the ground, not a ton of receiving usage, touchdown upside up in the air. The overall usage like is somewhat questionable, doesn't feel super stable, but once we're getting into like the running back 3 territory, if you can start a lead back, within this area, like that's probably the best you're going to get. Then we have Travis Etienne going up against the Lions. Now, I would have felt better about Etienne if Tank Bigsby did not play. Tank returned to practice this Friday, the day I'm recording this. So that's not great for Etienne, but I do think like this is probably the perfect game script for Etienne where they're almost 2 touchdown underdogs. He's the pass catching guy, probably going to get more run in this specific matchup, but it's also not a very good matchup. The Lions have allowed the 6th fewest points per game to the running back position. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Alexander Mattison going up against the Dolphins. He's going to be in a split with Zamir White, but it does seem like, he should be viewed as the lead back there. Now, moving into tier 7, these are guys that I would really prefer not to start, but if you have some guys on bye, injuries, whatever it is, I do get how you might be forced to play some of these dudes. We're going to start off with Tank Bigsby. Like I said, did return to practice today. Not a favorable game script, but he has been involved in this split here with the Jaguars. Then I have Javonte Williams going up against the Falcons. Based on his usage from last week, he is not a good option, but I just think, this backfield is still kind of up in the air. If they shifted more towards a split between him and Audric Estime, I would not be shocked. Then I have Tajay Spears, saw 10 opportunities in week 5. At this point, like, you'll take that. Gus Edwards saw 10 carries to Dobbins' 15. Could he potentially get into the end zone with close to double-digit opportunities? Sure. Tyler Algier kind of in the same boat. Can he cherry pick a goal line touchdown? Tried to do it last week. Think he failed 3 straight times, and then Bijan got it. So probably not great there. And then Justice Hill, he's had some big games in the receiving department. Maybe this turns into a trailing game script and he gets more involved. Zach Charbonnet, always going to have some usage, but the clear running back 2 behind Kenneth Walker. And then I just want to kind of talk about Raheem Mostert here a little bit. I believe he had a fumble late in the week 9 game. He goes into week 10 and he wasn't benched. He was still out there on some third downs, but his role was significantly reduced. You had 6 players log a carry for the Dolphins. He was not one of them. He did not get a single carry in week 10. So that's pretty tough. Maybe it was a 1-game punishment and he'll bounce back to decent usage, but really tough to trust that because his role in week 10 was just completely unusable. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 36 running backs. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.